Just imagine yourself rolling up to the racetrack. You're all ready, and soon you'll be out blasting around, having a great time, while trying to find the very edge of your cars and your own capabilities. But as with many things, this is the culmination of days or even weeks of prep. The point of this video is to go into what that prep looks like, what it looks like when you get to the track, and what it looks like when you go out. The track here is Sebring, and the group is NASA. Both the track you run at and the group you choose to run with matters. It can affect the type and the caliber of cars you run with. It'll affect what you pay and what else is going on while you're there. The track you choose may determine whether or not you can camp, whether there's power hookups for an RV or whether you need to run a generator, and what kind of car prep is required. For instance, a high temperature in the south requires much more attention to improving the factory cooling system, whereas running in a cold, rainy place might make having a set of rain tires and wheels prudent. But let's back up for a minute. First we'll discuss my setup, and then we'll go after what kind of prep everyone might need. So this is my particular setup, and I apologize for any wind noise. For this most recent trip, I used my 20-foot enclosed trailer, and I towed it with my Lexus GX470. Normally, actually, I tow it with my motorhome. This is a 42-foot for travel, and you know, this motorhome has primary duty as the family hauler and family vacations, but it is perfect for racing. This trailer I got 5 years ago. Unfortunately, they don't age very well, and it's about 3,000 pounds empty, and tongue weight is about 300 pounds empty. This thing is good for, this GX470 is good for 600 pound tongue weight and 6,700 pounds towing capacity. With everything I've got in here, this trailer is probably about 7,000 pounds. So it works. I don't prefer to use this. I'd rather use the motorhome, which is good to 10,000 pounds. This is the towing setup. I have a weight distribution hitch, which it very much so helps it. These bars exert leverage on the tow hitch and then force the front end down, which helps prevent it from kind of porpoising and stuff like that. This thing also has air suspension, so as soon as you load it down, it levels out really well, and everything looks good in it. It feels pretty good. It's just not very powerful. You know, it's got a 4.7 V8, but it just doesn't do the job that well. And so the trailer I've modified a bit. I put in, besides, you know, fixing the clearance lights as they go, I installed here, this is you know, from eBay or whatever, this is an outlet, so I can run an extension cord at the track or wherever I happen to have power to it, and then I have power inside. I also put up these lights. These are also from Amazon, so I got one on the back and one on the front side, and I'll show you the wiring in a moment. Not stock, but very helpful. So this is the current setup as I actually return from the track. I strap the car down through the D-rings in the trailer, which go into the cabinets here, and I go through the wheels, come around and come back. Some people cross the straps, but that's really no better than what I'm doing here, because in either case, if you roll the trailer, the car can just come right up. It's not gonna stay put. So in this case, you know, you can do side to side. So the crossing the straps might actually be better than this, but this is what I've been doing for a while, and the car's never moved, so I think it's only gonna move if there's an accident. So I'm not tremendously worried about it. I've gone over some pretty rough roads and it has not moved, both on my open trailer and on this enclosed trailer. So this is what I keep up front. It tends to be light stuff and, well, I guess some big stuff. So I bring this big ass fan from Harbor Freight and an air compressor. I have a battery charger. This is a box full of spares, spare tire for the trailer, empty gas can that I should really throw away, and I haven't. And then I bring what I would consider are essentials. So I have disposable gloves, funnels, fluids, bug spray, hand sanitizer, COVID times, one-man brake bleeder, which, you know, if you trailer the car, you really don't have to do this stuff at the track, but I bring it just in case. Cloth-like rags, impact gun, table, 3 chairs for the family or people. I think that's it for the front. So you'll notice that I move. So at the track, I keep all of this in the cabinets up there. But once I am towing, admittedly only with the Lexus, this doesn't really matter for the motorhome. But when I'm towing with the Lexus, where the tongue weight really matters, I'll move all of the tools back here, just to help prevent, you know, the weight being too heavily loaded on the Lexus. It will not sway until you get really lightly loaded on the tongue weight, which is not a problem with this trailer. So let's go through what I bring and why I bring it. So the first thing you'll notice is 3 gas cans. So before I go, I will go fill up the car with 93, and I will fill up these 3 gas cans, each with 93. And I find that this gets you through one day. So each run I use roughly 5 gallons of gas, usually a little more, depending on how hard you're pushing it. And so you get back, you fill up 1 5-gallon. 4 sessions a day. 3 cans gets you by. Jack stands, a pair, preferably 4, but a pair will do. This is my automotive specialty toolbox. This used to actually be, this thing's probably 30 years old. Ever since I was like 14 years old, I had this toolbox. But I tend to keep things that are particularly special tools. So you have the radiator fan wrench, which ironically I have an E-fan, so I don't even need that anymore. Little clamp tools, crow's foot, clutch alignment tool, and fluid clamps, some other bits. But yeah, automotive specialty tools. I have this one, which is screwdrivers and screwdriver like things, so picks, stuff like that, magnet. This is random crap I grabbed out of the garage before I left. We have a vacuum bleeder, gloves. This is a digital tire pressure gauge. Excellent. It's expensive, but it was worth it. Painter's tape, because you have to make numbers on the car, so you'll need painter's tape to do that. A lot of people, I mean pretty much everybody actually gets professional numbers made, but painter's tape is more than fine. Extra, these are new socket sets, because you lose sockets and stuff, so I grabbed the new sets, and normally they're in my toolboxes. It's a flashlight, O-rings, literally just anything I thought I might need. There's the air chuck for the compressor. This is a basic socket set. Things you're really not likely to need. Fuel injection pump tester. These are like long extensions and breaker bars and things like that for sockets. This is a small torque wrench. These are an adapter set, so different socket sizes. Spanners. This is an oil pressure test kit. Again, some of these tools are pretty exotic. You're not going to need them at the track, and if you do need them, you're having a really pretty bad day. This is larger sockets for like wheel hubs and things like that. This is electronics and electrical, so wire terminals, soldering iron, voltmeter, wire, solder, electrical tape, that kind of thing to fix electrical problems. Big torque wrench. This is the Irwin digital torque wrench from Harbor Freight. I love it. Very good. Clicking. And this is an impact socket set. That is the Pittsburgh aluminum jack. And this is wrench and wrench style tools. So I have in here like needle nose pliers, hose clamp pliers. This is what are these called? Snap ring pliers. I have a crimping tool for those wire terminals and things like that. So to get past the overkill, what do you need? Like, what is the basic necessity here? And I would argue the basic necessity would be a basic socket set, a torque wrench for your wheel lugs, In the case of BMW, a 17 millimeter socket for the wheel, and I would say an air gauge, and the painter's tape for your numbers, and I think that's about it. If you need air, there's probably going to be somebody somewhere you could get air from. It would be advisable to bring one of those little tire compressors. You know, if you're coming to the track on your street tires and you're just getting started on this, you're not going to need to pull off your wheels and tires. You're not going to need a jack. You're not going to need jack stands. You know, these kind of things are useful for if you are coming and you have tires that do very well in the dry, and then you have another set of tires that do very well in the wet, and you need to swap them out. You're going to need jack stand. You're going to need a jack. So I know this tool setup may seem overkill to you, but it actually is pretty mild in comparison to what other people bring, especially the race teams. But the thing you got to remember about a track day is you are spending gobs of money on your hotel. You are spending money on getting there, your time and money getting there. You are spending $500 plus for the track event fee itself. And if you have an oil light come on unexpectedly, you're going to want to be able to figure out whether or not if you continue running, it's going to damage the engine. If you have a basic problem, you want to be able to fix it and get back out on the track. You don't want your whole weekend to be ruined because you don't have some stupid tool you could have just thrown in the trailer, you know? So I definitely lean to the side of overkill. And an important part of this is every part you repair on your car, you keep the old part. So if you do, like on a BMW, you do cooling system maintenance. So I have spare radiator, spare expansion tank, spare all of it. Spare hoses, everything you can think of. So yeah, that's basically the tool setup. Alright, I can probably show you what is non-standard about this trailer that I installed specifically for track days. So this trailer came with these two lights, and these lights only come on when the headlights of the car that is towing it is hooked up, or the motorhome. I installed these are from Amazon, and I wired those four, and I did it to the switch panel. Four of the five of these are in use, so this one is wired into those lights, or I'm sorry, no, this one's wired to that light, this one's wired to the rear light, and then this one is wired to these, so I can actually turn these on too. And this also has the side effect of turning on all of the exterior lighting of the trailer, the marker lights. This is all installed into this cabinetry, and the way I built this is 2x4s and plywood. These doors are birch plywood, and I just used a router. To route grooves where they go into. And inside of here I installed a winch, and this is a thing that is not, there's no like right way to do it. I mean, there's definitely a wrong way to do it, but not a right way. So the way I set all this up is I have that outlet that I put on the trailer over there, and I wired the electrical to there using just Romex, and I also came up on top and I do two outlets on top, there and there, and the top functions as a workbench. And it's a little loose in the center, but it really does just fine. I don't need to improve it at all. And the way I did this was I used self-tappers to put bracing all along the wall here, and then I used these the Craig jig to do pocket hole screws, and I did that for attaching this to the wall. And then this is all the wiring too for the switch panel, so I just pulled everything through the walls. And for charging, I use this Black & Decker thing. It's a little 2-amp charger, and I just keep it plugged in most of the time, and that'll charge up anything I use from the winch. And in the winch, there's the battery for the winch, obviously, and the winch. It came with a hardwired remote that's fairly short, and it's not very convenient for, you know, staying out of the way of danger. So I installed this from eBay. It's a wireless winch remote, and it allows you to kind of get back from it, and that's all the wiring for that. So of course I have it wired backwards, so in is out and out is in. And it has a bit of a delay to it, which is a little annoying. Like, watch. Okay, I think I hit off switch accidentally. So you just click it once. It runs for like a second or two. So when I first installed this, I pulled the car up into the trailer, and it pulled in with this angle, and it proceeded to destroy the winch cable, and I had to actually cut a bunch of it off and put a whole new head on it. I wish that it had a central pulling point, but it doesn't. So the cable is supposed to kind of line up, you know, alongside of each other, but it kind of bound up. So now I will only pull the car in with the winch if I need to, but it's still really nice for letting the car out of the trailer. So once upon a glorious time I had a sport bike, but I do not anymore. And I used to tow it in this trailer sideways. It barely fit. It was a beautiful thing. I was able to bring the car and the motorcycle on trips. Now I don't have that anymore, and I left the chuck in there, but this E-Track and these E-Track tie downs work great for tying this fan down. I don't know why I got the tall one instead of the one that sits on the floor, but the tall one's really nice for aiming. And you know, when you're at the track in Florida and you're kind of outside, the fan makes all the difference. I thought of a couple more things to talk about. So I have probably about 100 feet in extension cords here, but one thing to keep in mind that not a lot of tracks have power for you. Most of the ones I've been to, they don't have power at all. And I say this as somebody who's pretty inexperienced. I've only been to Sebring and I've only been to New Jersey Motorsports Park, but I would expect that to be the case in most places. So a small generator that can run your whatever setup you want to have, especially if you're camping, it could be a really good idea. And this is the Cobalt QuietTech air compressor from Lowe's. I really like it. It's very compact. It's not very heavy. It does the job great. For this type of thing, for like bringing a small compressor to an event, this is as good as it gets. Final thing is I like these plastic hose hangers used for the, I mean, these are like $2 or whatever, but they've done the job. No complaints. So another thing, these trailers don't often come with spares, so I ordered a spare tire, and these are the tires that it came with. I have the Goodyear tires on there now. These tires, they're basically only the only American-made decent trailer tire that exists. There are some Chinese-made ones that are decent, but like I think Maxxis is one, but this is the only American-made one, Goodyear Endurance. And the other thing I carry is an entire hub assembly. I can't tell you how many times I've seen trailers with the whole wheel and hub assembly just ripped off. So that's a whole assembly, so no matter what happens to the trailer, I should be able to fix it on the side of the road. And then of course, you know, you got to make sure to replace your tires every 6 years. Alright, so let's talk electronics. This is the minimal electronics package that I will bring. This is a phone that will also be a hotspot. There's a laptop with a big hard drive in it. This is an audio recorder with a wind sock on it. My cell phone. This is a windshield mount for my cell phone. A little Bluetooth speaker. And this is an external GoPro battery charger with an extra battery. So, and then this is a one of those kind of Gorilla Pod style mounts. And on that I have a tripod to GoPro adapter, and then I have a GoPro kind of extension. So when I originally started on track days, I mean, I've always wanted to collect the data. So back then, you know, the technology wasn't what it is now. It was a Windows mobile handheld, and I want to say it was Race Chrono back then even. But I used an app on there, and it would connect to, I had a Bluetooth 10 hertz GPS that I taped to my roof, and this thing would take in that, you know, GPS data, and it would take in OBD2 data from a Bluetooth OBD2 reader, and I took video with, it was a Creative Labs Beto HD. And then when you're all done, you can kind of sync everything up on the computer using, again, I believe it was Race Chrono that ran on the computer, and it would sync the video together. So you'd have an overlay of the track, and you'd have the gauges and the OBD2 channel, so you could see like your engine temperature and stuff as you drove, as you showed the video going down the track. So these days it's basically the same thing, but it's more compact and easier to use. This is Race Chrono Pro. It's a $20 app, and it has quite a few features. It can connect to those Bluetooth OBD2 readers, which I would recommend, because the internal, not OBD2 reader, Bluetooth GPS, which I would recommend because the built-in GPS on the phone is kind of spastic, at least on my phone. This is a Razer phone too, and so what you'll see is when you're going around the track, the speed will go up real fast and down real fast, and it won't really mesh with what's actually happening in reality. You know, it reads the OBD2 channels just fine, and you know, it's good enough to show kind of your position on track on the track map on the overlay. But so when you go to the track, if you want to record video on a GoPro, the thing to keep in mind is that a GoPro, like if you get a kit for the GoPro, it comes with like a 32 gig card. That card can store about an hour of video. Now your session might be 20, 25, 30 minutes, but you have to line up for 10 or 15 minutes before. And if you want to make sure everything's working, you want to get this all running ahead of time. So you're looking at 40, 45 minutes of video per session. So what happens is you go back to your campsite / trailer / whatever, you have a dead GoPro battery, you have a full card, full phone memory, because the phone, it can record on the phone's camera as well at the same time, which I'll talk about more in a second. And you need to do a certain amount of thing in an hour and a half. So like I've run right now with NASA, you have an hour and a half between sessions, roughly. And that sounds like a lot, but when you come back, you need to check the air pressure of the tires, because you want to log, if you're keeping data and you're serious about keeping data, you want to log the exact tire pressure before you go out and immediately when you come back. You want to adjust the tire pressure in whatever way you want. You have to put 5 gallons of gas in there using those awful gas cans. It's going to take you like 20 minutes. You want to like check your oil, look for fluid leaks, look for coolant leaks, look for anything developing, because you know it will develop on the track. You know, it's a rough environment, and you know you're going to get water. You want to sit a second and relax and decompress. And well, on top of all that, you have to manage the video and this stuff if you want to. So one of the things that I've found that makes life easier is if you copy everything immediately after the session to the computer and you put everything in a folder for that run. So I have this taped down in my interior, and I start it and I record audio with this, and it kind of cuts through the wind noise and gets a good exhaust note, and you know, it makes for a better video when you synchronize this together. So I'll copy this card onto the computer. I'll take the memory card out of the GoPro, copy all that into a folder in the computer and empty it out. I will swap the battery with the external charger so that I never have to worry about charging the battery, because the GoPro, if you buy just a standard GoPro, you have to charge the battery in the GoPro. So the whole time you're not running, the battery can't be charging, and it's a little iffy to try to charge that battery, that hot battery, because the GoPro is very hot after a run. In an hour, it really doesn't happen. So this is, if you're going to use GoPros, this is highly recommended, so you can swap batteries out. So once you do all that, you're good to go. So now Race Chrono is pretty neat. It will record all of the data, like all of the data. So you can record your engine RPM through the OBD2 channels. You can record coolant temperature, engine load, intake temperature, whatever you choose. There's channels that you choose to record. I don't record much. I'm mainly concerned with coolant temperature. It will record a theoretical, so based on this session, it'll record a theoretical best lap. And what that means is, through each turn of the track, you run a certain time each lap. And it takes the best out of each of those sections and records an optimal lap. So, in this case, if I ran the best I did in this whole session, my best possible lap was 2:47. So in this case, my actual best lap was 2:49 because I was not consistent enough to record that 2:47 over and over and over again. The race chrono is also neat. I can start a session to show you. So it will automatically bring up the track. So in this case, it's Sebring. You can unlock the orientation, and so you probably have it like that in the phone. So there's a number of different screens you can use. You can do the video screen, which will, in the camera, and you'll see it's trying to link up to the GoPro. I turned off the wireless connections, but it will automatically link up to the GoPro and automatically start recording on the GoPro. So one of the gotchas on here is that when you start a session, it will run and it will start logging all of your data and things like that. It'll log your GPS, your OBD2 channels. It will not start recording the camera unless you hit the button. I don't know why. And as you run, it will turn it on by itself, but it will not do it automatically. So you have to hit the record button, and it's pretty neat because this will actually connect. So I have the GoPro paired to it, and it will actually connect to the GoPro, turn it on. It's not always reliable at turning the GoPro on, but if it's on, it's very reliable at starting the recording. It'll connect to the GoPro via Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. I'm not entirely sure which. I know it initiates it with Bluetooth, but I don't know what happens after that. It'll connect to the GoPro and it will start recording. And one of the things to watch for is you want to make sure that you go into the camera settings of your phone camera and select whatever you want. So like mine defaults to 1080p, you might want to do 4K. Mine defaults with the image stabilization off, you might want to turn that on. And the reason for that is because when you have the phone locked to a car on a track like Sebring, I mean, it's shaking around pretty good and you get a rolling shutter effect. The image stabilization may help that and it may not. So, you know, be prepared for that. And then where I run on this program is down here. You click this thing, I will scroll down to the OBD2, which it's not showing, but it's right here, and it'll show me coolant temperature and a few other bits digitally, so I can see the exact coolant temperature as the engine's seeing it. And I'll just leave that up and running so I can glance at that, and that's is so incredibly helpful. It's so incredibly helpful to have that so that I do not overheat the engine. Now, as I was saying, I hang this from this thing, this is an excellent mount. I have no complaints about this mount. It's aluminum, it's anodized aluminum, and it holds it very well. And this suction cup is very good despite looking incredibly cheap and crappy. It holds in a racing environment. But what happens is there's a little bit of jiggle in this mount, and it will shake as you go. And it introduces this rolling shutter effect that makes the video look like jello. So I use the GoPro, and I actually use this thing on the Vader seats in my car. The Vader seats have like a headrest, but I mean, it doesn't matter, it's the headrest. I take these Gorilla Pod style legs and I wrap them around the headrest and I mount the GoPro to that. And that worked pretty well, except it had a little bit of shake because the seat shakes. So what I did was I actually used a ratchet strap to yank the seat back to the rear seat belt by the headrest, which tightened that seat down. And then I got really good, not really good, but pretty good video. I tried to do the helmet mount for the GoPro, and they just do not stick to my helmet. This helmet, it originally had a matte finish, and it started getting kind of gooey and gummy, so I used rubbing alcohol and goof off to take it all off and make it shiny. And it just does not stick. I'm not sure if, you know, I should take sandpaper to it. You know, it's a 3M VHB, but it sticks well to this plastic behind here, so I don't know. But yeah, helmet mount would be ideal, because then you know, you could run it with a passenger in the car. Like I had an instructor drive my car and I wasn't able to record his session because I was sitting where the GoPro's mounted. So that's the technology, and obviously if you don't care to track data, you don't care to keep video, you're just out there to have fun, you don't have to worry about any of this, and you have a lot more time to kill and to chat with people or whatever else, you know. So it's for everybody, it's their own kind of thing. One more thing you want to check in between runs. You especially want to check this before your first run, but one thing that may not be intuitive is after your first run, you want to check your lug nuts again, the torque, because like when these wheels were brand new, they actually loosened up the first run. So it's something to keep in mind, and you do not want a wheel falling off your car on the track. You cannot even imagine. All right, so we're back in the garage now. We've got the car in here, and we can start talking about prepping the car. So one of the first things you want to do is remove everything you can remove, and this is going to vary based on your car, and it's going to vary based on how you're coming to the track. So for instance, if you are bringing your daily to the track and you have a spare tire, you may want to leave the spare tire and take it out at the track. Probably nobody's going to steal it, you know. You just set up camp somewhere, an easy up or something like that, and you take everything out of the car there. So you want to pull out like your trunk liner, and see all of these wires. These are dead wires. If they had any power in them, tech would fail you. So you can't have exposed wires. Technically, this battery is supposed to be covered with NASA, but they don't notice that, or they let that go for me. Same deal with the interior. You want to pull out all of your floor mats, any loose items whatsoever. Like there can be nothing in the car. And they scrutinize your seatbelts. So this plastic surround on my driver's seatbelt fell off. So I had to actually super glue that back together in order to avoid scrutiny on that. Because the belt itself is not this plastic cover. It's, you know, the metal and strapping underneath. So the belt is fine. It's just the cover that's bad. So, you know, your track car is probably going to be older, and older cars have issues. So you want to check for any kind of leaks, coolant or oil, which means you kind of want to get under the car and look for everything. You also want to look up on top. They will reject you from tech if you have leaks. So you really need to make sure you got nothing dripping. So in my case, before I go, if I am not fairly fresh on the oil, I will do an oil change, oil and filter change. I would change the supercharger oil. Coolant, you know, I'll leave for about 2 to 3 years, and then I will change the coolant. I will not flush it. I will just drain it out, so it's kind of a partial change. You got to check and make sure your cooling is working right, your fans and everything. You have to install some kind of method to get your car off the track if it breaks or if you crash it. Because if you don't have this, they're just going to hook up to whatever they can find, and it's going to cause damage. So you need to make sure you have some kind of tow hook. Probably the most important thing you could do, you could check. You want to check your tires. You want to check and make sure your brake pads have good thickness on them, and you want to fully flush the brake fluid. You want all new brake fluid. Even if you're just using your regular street car and regular brake fluid, nothing racing, change it. Flush new fluid in. And one of the things that occurred to me recently, so I used to always flush with this pressure bleeder. It's a Motive pressure bleeder, and the hoses have all deteriorated over time. And I forgot to get new hoses. So I also have this Turner gravity bleeder. And I'm a little embarrassed to say I didn't know how these worked, and I didn't know how well these worked. So the deal is you have one pipe in this lid that goes to a straw that goes down to here. The other pipe is here just for storage, but you put it on the brake nipple. So how this works is you fill this before you even begin with a little bit of brake fluid. You put this on the nipple, and what happens is that brake fluid down there creates enough resistance to backflow that when you press down, so you just crack that nipple, you press down on the brake pedal, it'll go to the floor and push out brake fluid into here. When you release the pedal back up, it will not pull the air back in. So it's a one-man bleeder, and it's extremely effective. This was much faster actually than the motive bleeder, and it's smaller, it's more compact, and it's easier and cheaper. And the only difference really, I guess it's not faster if you really know what you're doing, but because with this you have to keep adding fluid to the reservoir. And when you begin, you also want to pump out the reservoir. You want to take like a turkey baster, pump that reservoir out so that you're not flushing all that old fluid through, because the fluid in the reservoir absorbs more moisture than any other fluid in the system. So you definitely don't want to push that fluid anywhere through the system. You want to get that out, fill the reservoir up with fresh fluid, and then begin the bleed process. I'm not going to go into that too much because there's tons of YouTube videos about that. So in my case, as somebody more experienced, I switched to track pads. So right now I'm running Hawk DTC 60s, and what about the back? Yeah, DTC 60s. Some people will say you only need track pads on the front axle. I really like how the car handles with track pads on both. When you have track pads on the rear, you are able to kick the rear end out much better, and it helps you get into trail braking. The issue with that is that if you are not super good, that's a spin. I mean, that's how I spun at Sebring this time. I got on the brakes a little too hard, and I'm not precisely sure why I spun, but I spun. And I spun during what would be considered trail braking. So, all right, so let's get the car up in the air. So as you go to the track, the first time you go, you're probably just going to be running on street tires. But as you get better and as you progress through the classes, you will want to acquire a set of dedicated wheels. In my case, these are Apex Arc 8s. I bought them in a group buy. They were very cheap, like $900. The stock wheels that this comes with this was an upgrade. These are forged style 24s, and these themselves are only 16 pounds. So these are very track-worthy wheels themselves. However, they have become very valuable in their old age. So I will not use them on the track anymore. So I use these. You don't want to use R comps your first run out. So if you're new, you actually want terrible tires, because you will learn a lot more about the car. And the problem with R compounds is when you get close to the edge in them, they have more slip angle than a regular street tire. So you have to kind of drive them wrong in compared to a street tire. So it's better to learn how street tires react first and then move on to these. These are absolutely super grippy. They're crazy. When you get R compounds, you kind of need to follow with the suspension and everything else as well. So one of the things the track techs are going to look at is they're going to look at your brakes. They're going to peek in there and see that your pads have ample life. Mine do, because I swapped the track pads, and my street pads are also fine because I barely ever drive this car. Another thing they're going to check is they're going to check the lateral play. So they're going to try to shake this wheel up and down, not up and down, but in and out on the top and bottom. And they're going to use two hands. If they jack the car up, they wouldn't jack the car up, they'll probably just shake it from here. They're going to feel for any play, and the reason they're doing that is because that is the sign of a failing wheel bearing. So I don't know if you can see it, but this one is failing. And so you feel just a slight bit of play, like a clunking. Not this way, because your tie rods will clunk a little bit, and the steering rack, it'll go all the way through the steering racks. There's always a little play that way. I wish there wasn't, but there is. But that's not unsafe. This is unsafe because this is a wheel bearing that's on the way out, and I don't know if you know how all this works. Basically, a failed wheel bearing will eventually result in the whole wheel and hub assembly just coming off the car. So it's a pretty dangerous situation, especially on the track. So they're pretty serious about it. So they want you to check that very well, and they will check it for you, especially if you're an HPDE 1. But if you are moving up through the groups, they trust you. You know, they trust you to know better, to look at it yourself, and to be trustworthy. So now that we're done with the track day, you can kind of see everything that happens. We'll collect these rubber bits from other people's cars as the tires get super hot and everything melts on the track. So we'll take this off, we'll clean all the brake dust off, and we'll put these away in storage and put the old ones back on. We'll also swap back to the street pads, which is the same process as swapping to the race pads. It's just in reverse since we're home. So with track tires and even street tires, what I'll do is after the track day, I will write down with a paint marker which spot it was mounted at. It doesn't work that well. So that's rear left. And what I'll do is, I mean, these tracks are kind of a circle and you tend to go one direction more than the other. So I will rotate them left to right, and then if they start looking like maybe the front or the rears are wearing faster, I'll swap them front to rear too. So this is 2 weekends on this set of tires, and you can see they've got some life left. I would say they have probably 2 to 4 more weekends left. So I'll just swap one set of brakes because there's probably a million YouTube videos about swapping brakes, so it's not really anything interesting. But one thing I'll point out about this car is if you want to do really well on the track and you have, like, so I have Bilstein Sport suspension and Bilstein Sport shocks, you take these upper strut mounts and you swap them left to right, right to left, and it creates, you know, about -2.5 degrees of camber. I mean, it's pretty awful for the tires on the street. They'll wear out pretty quickly, but on the track, it's an animal. And then another thing to do is the stock tire setup is a squared setup, so it's 7.5-inch wheels and 8.5 in the rear. So it's 225 width in the front and 245 in the rear. When you get your track tires, you want to get 245, and when you do, you will need spacers to clear on the front. These are, I believe, 15 millimeter. They look about 15 millimeter, 15 or 20, and that will put your wheels in the perfect position. So very good way to do it. And you can even see here, this says FR for front right. I keep track of these because who knows, maybe they wear into the rotor a certain way along with the street pads, and you know, to work better. But you know, if brakes in theory should wear at the same rate, so there should be no real reason to swap them. So probably keep them where I put them each time, unless one started to wear for some reason. But that, you have a caliper problem if that happens. And just think, if you have a dedicated track car that you don't drive on the street, you don't have to do any of this. You just leave it in track configuration. But I still drive this car on the street, and I enjoy driving this car on the street, so that's where I'm at with that. I have a bit of a lip on the rotor to get over. It's probably a sign that these rotors are nearing end of life. One thing to keep in mind is that if you go to use this tool and you start wrenching down on the caliper, and this piston is really hard to move, you need new calipers or rebuilt calipers. It should be smooth as butter, and it should be barely any force. Just starts to tighten up a little bit, it should just go right in. Look up the torque specs of these caliper bolts, the guide pins, torque them to spec. Those 2 pins are the only thing that stand between you and death. So I did misspeak a bit earlier, because I said that the tech inspection at the track will check certain things. And that's true, but ultimately you are responsible for making sure things are done. It's not their issue, it's your responsibility. I mean, it even says that this is the tech form. And every track group, every track day group is going to have something similar. And so, in addition to the things I said, you want to check the condition of the tires, the lug nuts, and then seat belts, gas cap, etc., etc. There's quite a few things in here. The important thing to note here is to not wing this. Like if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't have a torque wrench, you know, or say your calipers have hex sockets, but all you have are Allen wrenches, so you have no way to put those Allen keys in a torque wrench. And I'll give you an example here. So a torque wrench is going to take sockets, and you might have these Allen keys. You might have some weird kit with multiple of these, or you may have just a single one. That's not sufficient. You know, you need to have the socket version, and you need to use a torque wrench to tighten that to a specific specification from your factory service manual. And the same thing goes for the lug nuts. You don't want to just tighten those up. You want to tighten those up to a specified value. And actually, you know, most cars you can get away with about 100 Newton meters. I just wanted to put that out there because that's an important distinction, that it's your problem, and it's your problem to make sure it's done right. And if you don't know what you're doing, you have to take it to somebody who does. That's pretty key because, you know, I mean, the world we live in these days, you know, if you do your own tech inspection and then the wheel falls off your car and you crash into somebody and you put somebody in the hospital, I mean, I see liability for you there. So you have to think along those lines, because your street car insurance probably isn't going to cover you from stuff you do on the track. And so when the car is up in the air like this, I tend to torque it just to zip it tight, and then I won't torque it up till it's down on the ground. This actually gets it pretty close. And then I will set a torque wrench under the car so that, you know, a month later when I finally drive this car on the street, I'll remember to torque these to spec. This, by the way, is what happens to these street tires on the track. They will start chunking. You'll see chunks taken out of them. It doesn't happen to our comps, so it's one reason to switch once you're good enough. You can see these tires show the wear pattern because I have this negative camber, which you can't see when the car is up on the lift, but you can see when it's down. It wears the inside shoulders of these pretty bad. That's not as bad as those stance clowns, but it still eats through the tires much faster on this side than this side. So if you have the ability to, you know, midway through the life of these tires, take the tires off the wheel and swap them over for these directional tires, that's what you do. So when it actually comes to driving on the track, you'll basically line up in a designated place at a designated time. You'll probably have mandatory classroom sessions to attend first. You'll get in line, and your instructor will find you and you'll take off. Your first lap is going to be a warm-up lap to get all the fluids up to temperature as well as your tires and brakes. After that, you can start to drive with gusto. There are a couple of rules I've come up with to remember for your very first track day. Rule number 1, you are slow. No matter who you are, no matter what vehicle, there will always be somebody that will. If not in your run group, then in one of the more advanced run groups. No amount of spirited street driving prepares you for driving on the track. Don't try to outdrive your skill, and don't be embarrassed to be slow. Keep your wits about you and let the faster cars by. If you're lucky, there will be at least someone else slower than you. If you're unlucky, you'll be faster than everybody else and you'll be constantly waiting for a point buy. If you're in a fast car and a Miata catches up to you, they caught up to you because they're faster than you in general, even if they're not in the straights. Let them buy it. Rule number 2. Your goal is consistency and attention. New track drivers are usually overlooked. Trying to control the car while remembering to look for corner workers, while trying to remember what the flags mean, while making sure that nobody behind you needs a point by, while trying to get your own point by, while watching your car's vitals while your instructor is shouting at you that we're about to die. This all adds up. What gets you soloed, which is HPDE 2 in NASA, is consistent lap performance, and not so much of your lap times, but staying on line. Smooth, firm braking, the ability to course correct quickly and accurately in reduced grip situations. All of this while not missing any corner workers and doing timely point buys. Rule number 3. Late apex. Even when you stay online, there is a tendency, and this is something I'm guilty of, to apex early. The perfect racing line is an unsafe line for a new driver. If you brake hard, apex late, and leave some room to spare on the exit, you have a lot of room for correction and you're less likely to spin. As you improve, you'll gradually feel the perfect line come to you. The late apex habit is extremely easy to correct when you start shooting for lap time, so it's not something to worry about. Rule number 4. Learn to reset. Mistakes compound. Often a spin looks like a series of mistakes that get worse and worse. A bad trip through a turn leaves you thinking about that mistake while you're heading into the next turn, causing reduced focus through that turn. You need to learn to forget about the immediate past and reset. You will have losses of grip. Things will happen that will throw you for a loop. You need to become stoic and unshakable. And honestly, such a skill is useful in nearly all aspects of life. Rule number 5. Learn something, whether that's what work your car needs to do better next time, radiator baffling and water wetter, or methanol injection in the tune. Or learn where you have a tendency to apex and brake improperly. If you spin, try to learn from that so you repeat it as infrequently as possible. Rule number 6. Know when to dial it back. Last session of the day, no need to drive 10/10ths or even 9/10ths. You're tired. Make sure to read over the documentation provided. In a good group, a lot of information goes into these documents and they are absolute gold for beginners and people who are experienced alike. They help serve as a checklist of what to do, what to bring, and what to expect. A few other tidbits I can throw in. Typically, the track will have some kind of hot food. One of the nice things about driving with NASA is that there are actually high-quality races that you can watch at dinner in between sessions. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. In reflection, I might have focused a little too much on how I prepare and a little too little on how an absolute newbie might prepare. But I actually think that's worthwhile because it's nice to know, for someone new, what kind of expenses and prep works for somebody who makes this a habit. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you want to see more or less of this kind of content, let me know that as well. Otherwise, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz, and I'll see you all next time.